Mr. Hastings, a former member of the Rules Committee.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 8 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this rule and the total blockade erected by House Democrat leaders to any amendments being offered on this over 1,200-page bill, this $10 billion omnibus land package. This bill is a monster bill created by the Senate, stacking together more than 170 pieces of different legislation. Over 100 of these bills have never been voted on in the House. The legislative strategy behind the creation of this omnibus bill was to make a bill, apparently, like AIG, that is too big to fail. Of course, the bill does contain some worthwhile provisions, including a few that I offered. But if we were wise in this House, our recent experiences with TARP and the stimulus passage would serve as a cautionary tale about the need for deliberation before passing gargantuan bills. Last week, for example, Congress loudly expressed indignation about the Wall Street bonuses. But now we learn that restrictions on bonuses were in the original legislation, but they were stripped out in the final bill by someone in Congress, specifically in the Senate. And yet, here we are again, about to ensure that another far-reaching bill will move through the House unexamined and with no opportunity for amendment. However, there are many areas of this bill that need improvement. I filed, Madam Speaker, just 10 amendments with the Rules Committee on the most serious areas of concern, and let me highlight just a few of them. Ensuring protection of our border security. Producing American-made energy that will create new jobs. Ensuring public access to federal lands, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. And restoring Americans' Second Amendment rights while on federal lands. This was struck down last Thursday by a judge here in D.C. On the need to protect our borders, do we know what effect the enhanced environmental restrictions under this bill will have on border security? No. We do not. The Senate has stricken out an amendment by Mr. Grijalva of Arizona to the National Landscape Conservation System bill that was adopted in this House last April, 414 to nothing. This unanimously approved House amendment stated, and I quote, "Nothing in this act shall impede any efforts by the Department of Homeland Security to secure the borders of the United States," unquote. The Senate stripped this provision from the bill, and now that protection is gone. I filed an amendment with the Rules Committee to restore this provision as it reflects the unanimous House position, as well as another amendment to apply this border security protection language to the entire omnibus bill. We must ensure that provisions in this bill do not ban the use of vehicles and other technology to patrol and secure our border. But this rule we are debating doesn't allow any amendments to be debated or voted on by this House. The force behind denying any amendment to the omnibus bill is so great, that the House is apparently willing to fall over and play dead on border security. We don't even know who is responsible for deleting this amendment in the Senate. If this bill becomes law without fixing this border security loophole, I fear we will likely look back in the future and say, well, we really should have kept that safeguard in and not let the Senate strip it out, just like the Senate stripped out the AIG provision that we railed against last week. The price Americans pay to fill up their cars is starting to go up again, yet H.R. 146 prohibits American-made energy production on federal lands, production that would create new jobs in these difficult economic times. Our nation can't afford to shut down the creation of jobs, and we can't afford to become even more dependent on foreign oil. The omnibus bill even locks up federal lands from renewable energy production, including wind and solar. Again, amendments that I filed to address these issues were rejected by the Rules Committee. As written, Madam Speaker, the omnibus bill prevents and bans public access to federal lands in many ways. The recreational riding of bicycles and motorbikes is prohibited in over 2 million acres of public land. Wheelchair access to wilderness areas is effectively banned as well. Madam Speaker, let me explain. Federal law does not ensure that wheelchairs capable of use in outdoor natural areas are allowed. It only permits, Madam Speaker, only permits wheelchairs that are, quote, suitable for indoor pedestrian area, unquote. Now, Madam Speaker, I know there's a great deal that politicians disagree on, but I hope that we can agree on this fundamental fact. Nature is outdoors. Wilderness areas and national parks are located outside, and wheelchairs and similar devices that allow the disabled access to outdoor natural areas are not allowed under existing law or this omnibus bill. Furthermore, current law federally expressly says that accommodations for wheelchairs or the disabled in wilderness areas are not required. So therefore, the Disabled Act reigns. Public lands should be available for public enjoyment, and that includes disabled, yet access for disabled veterans and all disabled Americans is not protected by this omnibus. So I propose several amendments to address these shortcomings, including explicit protections for bicycle access, existing motorized recreational vehicle access, as well as an amendment for access for disabled and disabled veterans on lands covered in this bill. I would be happy to yield.
I thank my friend for yielding. Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate our friend from Pasco, the ranking member of the Resources Committee, for his very hard work on this issue, and to report to the House, unfortunately, the fact that the Rules Committee last night, after a very, very contentious debate, chose to, on a party line vote, decide not to allow the very thoughtful amendments that Mr. Hastings has brought forward to be considered. Now, it's interesting to note, if my friend would continue to further yield, that we in the last week or two have been dealing with the aftermath of the 1,100-page stimulus bill that was brought before us. And we know that last week we spent all of our time trying to figure out a way around the $167 million in bonuses that were provided to AIG executives. And everyone was up in arms about this, and people are still pointing fingers to determine how it is that that measure got into the stimulus bill. Well, one of the things we found is unintended consequences continue to come forward, and we, thanks to Mr. Hastings' efforts, found an unintended consequence. Now, I've got to say, Madam Speaker, that for many, many years, we as Republicans have been maligned regularly by our friends on the other side of the aisle for standing up or trying to pull the rug out from seniors, starving children, the disabled. And I would not dream of standing here, Madam Speaker, and arguing that there is any member of this House, Democrat or Republican, who would want to deny the disabled access to wilderness areas. But I know this: a problem was raised, and it came to the forefront.
Gentleman from Washington's time has expired.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I will yield another 2 minutes to Mr. Hastings.
Gentleman from
I
Washington.
yield my friend from California.
I thank my friend for yielding. And let me say, and I thank both of my colleagues for their kindness. Let me say, Madam Speaker, that as we look at this challenge, which has been such a great one, there is no one, as I said, who would want to deny any disabled person access, Democrat or Republican, even though we're regularly accused of such heinous acts and have been for many, many years. But Mr. Hastings found the unintended consequence here, and last night in the Rules Committee, we came forward and said, here is a way to deal with this challenge. We want to ensure that people who are disabled have access to our wilderness area. And again, Mr. Hastings had 2 amendments. We offered them, and on a party line vote, he was denied an opportunity to offer those amendments. And again, this gets to this point, Madam Speaker. We're in this era of bipartisanship, as put forward by Speaker Pelosi, a great desire to listen to the input provided by members regardless of political party. And here we have a common sense package of amendments that will deal with something that no one wants to allow happen, and yet members of the Republican Party were in fact shut out from having a chance to offer those amendments whatsoever. And I believe that it's a very sad day for this institution and the Committee on Rules that such action would take place. And I thank my friend for yielding and thank him again for his very hard work on this important issue.
Thank you, and I appreciate the gentleman's remarks. Madam Speaker, there's another issue that I offered an amendment on with Mr. Bishop of Utah dealing with the Second Amendment rights. And I think he will speak to that. But I want to tell the House that this is an issue to correct a federal judge's decision from last week that bans the use of firearms under state law on certain federal lands. Now, we can rectify that without slowing this bill down at all. I ask the gentlelady for one additional minute.
Yes, Madam Speaker, one additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized for another minute.
We can rectify this, Madam Speaker, by defeating the previous question. Because if we defeat the previous question and allow a motion to amend the rule to take up the amendment that I offered dealing with the Second Amendment, then we can add that to the package and this House will have an opportunity to vote on that. And the reason I bring this up, while 2 weeks ago the House put in the Altmaier Amendment, at that time the restriction, the non-restriction I should say, on gun ownership in federal lands was in place until the judge struck it down. This corrects that, and it needs to be corrected, and we can correct it today by defeating the previous question and allowing us to amend the rule to take up my amendment on the Second Amendment. And so I urge the people when we get to that point to vote no on the previous question so we can amend the rule to take up this issue on gun rights that Mr. Bishop will talk about later. And with that, I yield back my time.